Hi, today we are going to be looking at how to plant a hedgerow. Hedgerows are incredibly important in any landscape. They're very good for connecting parts of woodland, so animals have got a corridor in which to live. They produce lots of flowers and fruit and berries, so there's lots of habitat and food for wildlife. They can also protect the landscape from erosion in flood events. They protect cattle. Cattle are less likely to die if they can shelter themselves from the wind or the sun. So there are lots of reasons to have hedgerows, so we're going to show you how to plant one today.
For this, you'll need tree spacing guide, tree stake, tree tube, spade, hedgerow guard, bamboo cane, holly guard, holly trees, lump hammer, gloves, bamboo pegs, knife, and mulch roll.
To begin with, when you plant a hedgerow, you want to have the grass nice and short if possible, so that the grass isn't going to grow up and outcompete the trees while they're still very young. So here we're going to begin. We've laid out a mulch roll. This is a natural product. This one's sheep's wool. You can get hessian as well, and it'll help suppress any grass coming up that might take over instead of the trees. So the first thing I'm going to do is I've laid out some of the mulch roll here. I'm going to use some bamboo pegs, and about every half a metre I'm going to use a peg just to make sure that the mulch roll doesn't lift in the wind or that little creatures can lift it up. The bamboo pegs are cut in a spike to make them more easy to sink into the ground. So we'll do both sides. This mulch roll is 1 metre wide, which is a lovely distance if you're going to have a double rowed hedgerow. There we go. I'm going to start by measuring out where I want the trees to go. You can do this by eye, but we think that it's much better if you have something that you can use to measure so that you make sure you get the trees at about the right distance. We've marked on here where a good place is to plant the trees. You want roughly 5 trees in a double row to create the best sort of hedge. So each tree is going to be roughly 45 centimetres apart. So we've marked on roughly 45 centimetres here. I'm going to lie that down the middle of the mulch roll. And then I cut a slit on either side where we want the trees to go, and in that slit we can then plant the trees. It's a double row of trees, and so I'm going to cut a slit for each tree on each side about a spade's width long. So you end up with approximately 5 trees per metre. I've cut a slit about every 45 centimetres, so you can see I've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 trees approximately every metre distance. Right, so we've got some native species that I'm going to show you how to plant today. We often have about 50% of hawthorn that makes up a lovely natural part of the hedgerow. It's a good barrier because of the spikes and it provides lots of fruit and habitat for wildlife. I've got some hazel. We often plant hazel as well, makes a lovely hedgerow tree. We've got some spindle. This one's got lovely long roots, and again I'll show you how to plant that. And we've got some beech. So we'll start by planting the hazel. These are all bare root whips, so we've kept them in water to make sure the roots are nice and wet and they haven't risked drying out or damage occurring before they go into the ground. So I'm going to come over to the mulch mat and just make a slot. So use the slot that I've cut with the knife in the mulch roll and just wiggle the spade around just to make sure that there's enough room for the tree to fit in. With this one I think just a slot would be adequate. So we're going to make sure that all the roots are within the soil so that they're under the soil and they're not going to dry out when it becomes dry or windy. It's always a fiddly job. So you just want to make sure that the root collar, so just where the roots begin to meet the stem, that's at the top, the surface level of the soil. So it's not sticking out, and the roots are also not sticking out, they're all tucked away into the soil. So once the tree is in the slot, you then use your boot and just push the edges of the slot together to make sure that the tree is tucked in and there's no air around the roots. It might be in a bit of an angle, that's very normal, but we'll put a stake into it soon to help it grow more upright. You don't want to heel it in too much because then you're going to compact the soil and the water won't be able to get to the roots. But you also don't want it to be loose. So if you give it a little bit of a tug, you don't want it to lift out of the ground. Okay, so that tree's in the ground now. I'm going to show you a couple of other ways to plant trees that we like to include within a hedgerow if possible. I'm going to plant a holly. It's really good to have some evergreen trees within a hedgerow. They provide berries in the winter and different habitat and shelter that's evergreen, so it's all the year round. Hollies often come in a pot, so there's some soil around their roots, so it needs just a slightly bigger hole in order to fit the tree into the ground. So I'm going to use one of the slits I've made already and just dig a bit more of a hole, cutting into the ground just to make sure that there's space for the tree to go in. Ideally the tree is quite nice and moist, it hasn't been allowed to dry out. And again, you're going to press it down into the hole and make sure that the root collar, so where the roots begin, is just at the level of the ground. Again, we're going to heel the ground shut. You don't want to do it too much to damage the roots, but just make sure that the ground is closed up again. So again, that one's in the ground, and I'll show you in a minute how to guard this type of tree. So at Forest of Avon Trust, we recommend that you include a larger, or we call a standard tree, approximately every 10 to 15 metres. I'll show you how to plant one of those. It can be the same size tree to start with as the other whips in the hedgerow, but we'll put a bigger guard on it. The main reason for this is that when the hedgerow is managed long term and the farmer or the landowner comes to cut the hedge, the bigger guard on the tree will be protected, and that'll enable that tree to get away and hopefully become a lovely large canopied tree dotted along the hedgerow. Again, this provides lovely habitat and roosts for birds of prey and bats that can then fly along the line of the hedgerow. So I'm going to plant a beech tree. It's nice to put the standard tree next to the holly. If you have some holly around the standard tree, it again provides extra habitat and a lovely place for lots of birds to live and feed. So I'm going to plant the tree in the same way. I'm creating a notch here and just loosening the earth so there's space for the roots to go in. It's like putting the tree to bed. You're just going to tuck all the roots in, make sure the roots are at the surface of the soil. And then I'm going to, again, just close up the gap, the notch that we've made. And again, just check that it's not going to lift out. No, it's nice and firmly in the ground. Right, I'm going to show you how to guard all these trees now. We're going to start with most of the whips will be in 60 centimetre guards. These protect the trees from voles and rabbits and other predators that might enjoy eating the delicious bases of these lovely little trees. Here we're going to use just a bamboo cane to make sure that the guard is held up and the tree will be able to grow healthily next to it. And we're using some biodegradable wraps. There are lots of types of guard for guarding trees. The old-fashioned type was a spiral. These ones are nice, they're biodegradable natural materials, so they'll break down over time. They're like an old-fashioned scroll. So if you've got large branches or the whip is a bit bigger, you might need to wrap it around by hand. But when it's small, you can just, if you're very careful not to knock all the buds off, slide the guard onto the tree. So I'm going to take the cane and put it to the side, so make sure that we're not going to damage the roots of the tree. But you need to make sure it's quite close to the tree itself. Push the cane in till it's firm and secure, so the wind's not going to blow it away. And then I'm going to slide the guard onto the stake. You need to be careful, you tuck in every little branch that might be sticking out. And then you can press it down a little bit to stop the voles that like to come in underneath and nibble the bottom of the tree. So that tree then hopefully will grow up, and over time, although deer may come and start to nibble, it'll be big enough and old enough to survive by then. So that'll help grow up into our lovely hedge. With the holly, we have a slightly different kind of guard. Hollies find it's too constricted to be in that environment there. So we're using a plastic evergreen guard here that sits over the tree, and we're going to use 2 bamboo canes to hold this open and make sure the tree's got space. So I'm going to drive the bamboo canes in just to the side of the tree to make sure that we're not damaging the roots that we've just planted. So push it in so that it's not going to fall over in any high winds. And then you can open up the guard like a tube, and there we go. Just feed the tree in. And again, press it down a little bit so that little animals aren't going to come underneath. There we go. So with all the holes, it means the air can pass through and the holly can breathe and begin to flourish. So finally, we've got our standard tree. This is the tree that we're going to allow to grow a little bit bigger than the other trees in the hedgerow. I'm going to use a stake and a lump hammer And again, we're going to guard this tree just to make sure the deer and rabbits can't get to it. You may need to pull the mulch mat away a little bit, and you want the guard to be downwind, so the stake is upwind of the tree. So if the wind is coming in this way, I'm going to put the stake on this side. Again, nice and firm so that no wind is going to blow it over. So again, loads of different kinds of guards. They used to be all made of plastic. Now you can get various different bioplastics. This one is a biodegradable hessian and tree resin guard. It's got natural wax around the top to stop the trees rubbing against it in windy conditions. This guard's got some metal ties. If you undo the metal ties and then gently feed the tree into the tube, you may need to bunch up the branches just to be careful that you don't damage anything or knock any buds off. Make sure the guard is in position and close to the ground, and then you're going to twist the ties, making sure the guard is square against one face of the stake and it's tightly held against the stake to make sure it's not loose. There you go. So it's nice and secure, and again, it's not going to move in the wind. And it's worth looking down and just checking that none of the sprouts, none of the shoots on the tree are caught within the tie inside the tube. You want to make sure the tree is nice and healthy and it's got room to flourish. Okay, and a few final words about looking after the hedge. You can add wood mulch on top of the mulch roll. It will suppress the weeds to some extent, but the ideal would be to add mulch as well. It's worth coming back regularly just to check that none of them have fallen over or that the guards don't need replacing. It's possible animals can come in and knock some sideways, so it's good to come in and keep an eye on them. And we recommend at least once a year either hand weeding or even adding some wood mulch just to make sure that the trees are growing up healthily. And we recommend in the summer, come along and just see if any of the trees have died, and then mark on them which ones it is. And then when you come back in the winter and tree planting season, you can replace the ones that have died and put new ones in so that you haven't got gaps in your hedgerow.